Clara Whitmore stood frozen in the doorway of her own drawing room, staring at her husband's hand resting on another woman's shoulder. The grandfather clock ticked behind her. Adrian didn't move, didn't explain. The woman's eyes met Clara's, not with triumph, but terror. And in that silence, everything Clara thought she knew about her marriage shattered like glass hitting marble. This is the story of how I almost destroyed my life by thinking I understood it. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday. Clara was standing in the conservatory, deadheading roses that had bloomed too early for the season, when she heard Adrian's voice through the half-open window. Low, careful, the way people speak when they're measuring every word. "I can't keep doing this," he said. She couldn't hear the response, just the murmur of another voice. Female. Unfamiliar. Clara's fingers stilled on the stem. She told herself it was nothing. A business call. A colleague. Adrian ran an investment firm. His days were filled with voices she didn't know. But that night at dinner, he barely looked at her. "Long day?" she asked, cutting into lamb that had gone cold while she waited for him to come home. "Complicated," he said. "Not long, complicated." She watched him push food around his plate, his jaw tight in a way that used to mean he was working through a difficult deal. Now she wasn't sure what it meant at all. "Adrian." He looked up. For a second she thought he might say something real, something that would stop the small, cold thing growing in her chest. "I'm just tired," he said. It was the truth that hurt most. Not a lie she could challenge, just exhaustion, as if being married to her had become work. They'd met 7 years ago at a gallery opening neither of them had wanted to attend. Clara had been there representing her father's foundation. Adrian had been dragged along by a client. They'd both gravitated toward the only painting in the room that wasn't trying too hard, a small landscape, muted blues and grays, tucked in a corner. "It's honest," Adrian had said, not realizing she was standing beside him. "It doesn't perform," Clara replied. He turned then, really looked at her. Exactly. Within 6 months, they were married. Not because of passion, though there was that, but because of something rarer, ease. Clara had never had to explain herself to Adrian. He understood her silences, her need for structure, the way she built walls to protect the soft parts of herself. And she understood his ambition, his loyalty to people who didn't always deserve it, the weight he carried from a family that had expected everything and given nothing. Their marriage wasn't a fairy tale. It was a partnership, equal, built on trust, or so she'd thought. The second crack came 2 weeks later. Clara found a receipt in Adrian's coat pocket when she took it to be cleaned. Dinner at Marguerite's, an intimate French place on the east side, the kind with dim lighting and tables too small for business meetings. 2 people. Wine. Dessert. She stared at the date. Last Thursday, the night he told her he was working late. Her hands didn't shake. That surprised her. She folded the receipt carefully and put it back where she'd found it. At breakfast the next morning, she asked, "How was Marguerite's?" Adrian's coffee cup paused halfway to his mouth. Just for a second. Then he set it down, his face carefully neutral. "What?" "Last Thursday, the French place." "It was fine." His voice was even, practiced. "Client dinner ran long. I didn't think you'd want to hear about Thornton's pension fund restructuring over eggs." He smiled. It looked almost real. "You're right," Clara said. "I wouldn't." But that night, alone in their bedroom while Adrian worked in his study, she opened his desk drawer. She wasn't the kind of woman who snooped. She'd never needed to be. The drawer was locked. Adrian had always been private about his work. Client confidentiality, he'd said, legal protections. Clara had never questioned it because she'd never had reason to. Now she stared at that locked drawer and felt something shift inside her, something that had been holding steady for 7 years finally giving way. She could ask him, confront him, demand to know why he was lying, but she already knew what would happen. He'd have an explanation, reasonable, airtight, and she'd want to believe it so badly that she would. Clara closed the drawer quietly and went back to bed. The third crack was the one that split everything open. It was a Saturday afternoon, early spring. Clara had come home early from a charity luncheon. The guest speaker had canceled, and the whole affair had dissolved into gossip she had no patience for. She'd expected the house to be empty. Adrian had mentioned errands, but his car was in the drive. She came through the side entrance, setting her purse on the hall table, pulling off her gloves. The house was quiet, except for voices coming from the drawing room. Adrian's voice. And another. Clara moved toward the sound without thinking. The drawing room door was half open. Adrian stood by the fireplace, his posture tense in a way she'd seen maybe twice in 7 years, both times when his brother had been alive and causing some new crisis. A woman sat on the settee, her hands knotted in her lap. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back severely, a face that might have been pretty if it weren't so hollowed out by worry. "I don't know what else to do," the woman was saying. Her voice cracked. "I can't keep—" Then she saw Clara. The woman went white. Adrian turned. For 3 seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. Clara's mind did what it always did in moments of crisis. It catalogued. The woman's cheap coat, Adrian's hand, which had been resting on her shoulder, now frozen in midair. The folder on the table between them, papers visible at the edge. "Clara." Adrian's voice was careful, the same tone he'd used that day through the window. "I can't keep doing this." "I didn't realize we had company," Clara said. Her voice came out steady, distant, as if she were commenting on the weather. The woman stood abruptly. I'll go." "Don't." The word came out sharper than Clara intended. She looked at Adrian. "Who is she?" "This is Marion Hale," Adrian said, still careful, still measuring. It's complicated." "Complicated," Clara repeated. The word tasted like metal. "You said that before." Marion's eyes darted between them. She looked terrified. Not guilty, terrified. That was the detail Clara would remember later. The detail that didn't fit. "I should leave you both to talk," Marion said quietly. She grabbed her bag, clutching it like a shield. "No." Clara stepped into the room properly now, closing the door behind her. "I think you should stay. Since apparently my husband has been meeting with you behind my back for— How long, Adrian? Weeks? Months?" "Clara, please." Adrian moved toward her. "This isn't what you think." "Then tell me what it is." Silence. Marion looked at the floor. Adrian looked at Marion. Neither of them looked at Clara. And that was when she knew. Not the details, not the why or the how, but the fundamental truth that had been building beneath the surface for months. Her husband was keeping secrets. And whatever they were more important than her right to know. "Get out," Claire said quietly. Marion didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed her things and fled, leaving behind only the folder on the table and the faint smell of cheap lavender soap. Adrian reached for Clara's arm. "Let me explain." She stepped back. "Don't touch me." "Clara." "How long?" He hesitated. That was answer enough. 6 months, he admitted. "But it's not 6 months." Clara's voice was still steady, still distant. But something was building inside her, something that would break through if she let it. She couldn't let it. Not yet. "You've been lying to me for 6 months." "I wasn't lying." "Then what do you call it?" Now her voice rose. "Secret meetings? Locked drawers? Dinners you don't mention?" "What exactly would you call that, Adrian?" "Protection." The word came out harsh, raw. "I was trying to protect you." Clara laughed. It sounded wrong. "From what?" "From this." He gestured helplessly. "From exactly this. You looking at me like I'm a stranger." "You are," she said, and realized it was true. "I don't know who you are anymore." That night, Clara didn't sleep. She sat in the guest room. She'd moved there without discussion, and Adrian hadn't argued, with the folder Marion had left behind. Inside were documents, financial records, letters, all bearing one name, Thomas Blackridge, Adrian's late brother. Clara had never met Thomas. He'd died 3 years before she and Adrian married, a car accident, sudden and brutal. Adrian rarely spoke of him except to say they'd been close once before Thomas had started making bad decisions. But these papers suggested Thomas's bad decisions had been worse than Adrian had let on. Fraudulent investments, embezzled funds, and the name Marion Hale listed as one of the victims. She'd lost everything: her savings, her late husband's life insurance, money that should have gone to her daughter's future, all to a scheme Thomas had orchestrated 6 months before he died. Clara read through it all twice, her mind churning. Adrian had been meeting with Marion, secretly, for 6 months, not because of an affair, because he'd been trying to fix his brother's sins. But Duchess, Mom. The next morning, Clara found Adrian in his study. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "I read the file," she said. He looked up. Hope flickered across his face, then died when he saw her expression. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Because it wasn't your burden to carry." "We're married, Adrian. Your burdens are mine, not this one." His voice was firm, final. "Thomas destroyed that woman's life, her daughter's future, and He stopped, swallowed hard. "I couldn't let it stand, but I couldn't drag you into it either. So you lied. I protected you. You don't get to decide what I need protection from." Clara's control finally cracked. "You don't get to make that choice for me. Someone had to." Adrian stood now, his own restraint breaking. "Do you know what it would have meant if this got out? Thomas's fraud? My family's name dragged through every paper in the city? You think I could ask you to live through that? You should have trusted me. I did trust you." He was shouting now. "I trusted you to be exactly who you are, too decent, too honest, too good to be tied to this mess." The words hung between them. Clara stared at him. At this man she'd built a life with. This man who thought he was protecting her by cutting her out of his decisions. This man who loved her enough to lie. "That's not trust," she said quietly. "That's control." She left the next day. Not dramatically, no screaming, no thrown dishes. Clara wasn't built for chaos. She was built for precision. She'd spent the previous night making arrangements. Her father's old hunting cottage in Derbyshire, empty for years but still maintained. Her own bank account, separate from Adrian's, as she'd insisted when they married. A car hired under her maiden name. "What are you doing?" Adrian asked when he found her packing. "Leaving." "Clara, please. I need time," she said. Not looking at him? If she looked at him, she might waver. "I need to think." "We can think here, together." "No." She folded a blouse with mechanical precision. "We can't. Because every time I look at you, all I see is 6 months of lies." "They weren't lies." "Yes, they were." She turned now. "Every time you said you were working late. Every time you locked that drawer. Every time you looked at me across the dinner table and told me you were just tired. Those were lies, Adrian. And I can't—" Her voice caught. She forced it steady again. "I can't be in the same house with someone I can't trust." "How long?" His voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know." "Clara, don't." She held up a hand. "Don't make this harder than it is." He stood there, helpless, as she carried her bags to the car. She didn't cry, didn't look back. She just drove. The cottage was exactly as she remembered. Small, drafty, isolated. 40 miles from the nearest town. No neighbors. Just hills and sheep and silence. Clara had thought the silence would be a relief. It wasn't. In London, she'd been able to fill the space between thoughts with activity, charity work, social obligations, the simple machinery of daily life. Here, there was nothing to distract her from the looping thoughts in her head. Adrian lied. Adrian protected you. Adrian didn't trust you enough to tell the truth. She tried reading, tried walking the hills until her legs ached, tried cooking elaborate meals she barely touched. Nothing worked. Because underneath everything was a question she couldn't answer. What do I do now? She could divorce him. The thought appeared fully formed one morning while she was making tea. She could end this marriage, start over, build a life that didn't include betrayal or secrets or locked drawers. But the thought felt hollow, like she'd be running from the problem rather than solving it. She could go back. Forgive him. Accept that his intentions had been good, even if his methods were wrong. But that felt like surrender. Like admitting that her hurt didn't matter as much as his reasons. So she stayed in limbo. Days bleeding into each other, alone in a cottage that smelled like old wood, and regret. 3 weeks in, something changed. Clara was going through papers she'd brought with her, old files from the Foundation, things she'd meant to organize for months. At the bottom of the stack was the folder Marion had left behind. She'd brought it without thinking. Now she opened it again, reading more carefully. The dates caught her attention first. Thomas's fraud had started 7 years ago, the same year she and Adrian had met. The scheme had collapsed 6 months before his death, but the money was already gone. Marion had filed suit, but with Thomas dead, there was no one to hold accountable. Until Adrian decided to make it his problem. Clara kept reading. Letters between Adrian and his family's lawyers. Arguments about liability and legal precedent. Adrian insisting the money be restored, the lawyers insisting it wasn't his responsibility. Then at the bottom of the file, something else. A letter in Marion's handwriting, addressed to Adrian, dated 2 months ago. I know you're doing this out of guilt. I know you think you owe me because of what your brother did, but I need you to understand, I never asked for this. I never wanted to be the reason you lied to your wife. I saw the way you looked at her in the hallway that day, like you were drowning and she was air. Whatever you're sacrificing for me, it's not worth it. Please, let this go. Let me go. Clara read the letter 3 times. Marion hadn't wanted the secrecy. She'd asked Adrian to stop, to tell the truth, and he'd refused. That night, Clara did something she hadn't done since arriving at the cottage. She cried. Not quiet, dignified tears. Ugly, heaving sobs that left her gasping on the bathroom floor, because she finally understood what had happened. Adrian hadn't betrayed her for another woman. He hadn't even betrayed her for a noble cause. He'd betrayed her because he couldn't let go of his guilt, because his brother's sins felt like his own, and the only way to atone was to fix them, alone, in secret, at any cost. Even if that cost was his marriage, even if the woman he was trying to help was begging him to stop. The realization didn't make Clara feel better. It made everything worse. Because she could forgive an affair. She could forgive a mistake. She could even forgive a lie told in panic. But this was a choice, made over and over again. For 6 months, Adrian had chosen his guilt over her trust, and Clara didn't know if that was something she could ever forgive. The next morning, Clara woke with clarity she hadn't felt in weeks. She packed her bags. Not to go home, she wasn't ready for that. But she couldn't stay here anymore, suspended in indecision. She needed answers, real ones, and the only person who could give them to her was Marion Hale. Finding Marion wasn't difficult. The financial documents had her address, a small flat in Camden, above a laundromat. Clara stood outside for 10 minutes before finally knocking. Marion answered on the 3rd knock. She'd lost weight since that day in the drawing room. Her eyes went wide when she saw Clara. Mrs. Blackridge. Don't, Clara said. Just, can I come in? Marion hesitated, then stepped aside. The flat was tiny, clean but worn. A child's drawings were pinned to the refrigerator, school photos on the wall, a life built on careful budgets and constant worry. I don't know what Adrian told you, Marion started. Nothing, Clara said. He told me nothing. That's why I'm here. They sat at a small kitchen table. Marion made tea. Neither of them drank. I didn't know he was married, Marion said finally. Not at first. He came to me 6 months ago, said he wanted to make things right. I told him it wasn't his fault. His brother was the one who... She stopped. But he wouldn't listen. He kept saying he owed it to me, to my daughter. Why didn't you tell him to tell me? Clara asked. Marion's laugh was bitter. I did. Every time we met, I told him he was going to destroy his marriage. He said you didn't need to know, that it was his problem to fix. And you believed him? No. Marion met Clara's eyes. But I was desperate. My daughter needs surgery. I couldn't... Her voice broke. I couldn't afford to have principles. Clara sat back. The pieces were falling into place now. Adrian wasn't just trying to fix his brother's fraud. He was trying to save a child. And he destroyed his marriage doing it. How much does he owe you? Clara asked. Marion blinked. What? The restitution. How much? 70,000 pounds, but he's already paid half. I'll cover the rest. Mrs. Blackridge, I can't. Yes, you can. Clara stood. Because I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me, so I can end this without wondering if I abandoned a child who needed help. Back in London, Clara walked into Adrian's office without announcement. He looked up from his desk, shock and hope warring on his face. Clara, I met with Marion, she said. The hope died. I know about her daughter. I know about the surgery. I know you've been trying to fix this alone. She set her checkbook on his desk. I'm paying the rest. Clara, you don't have to. I'm not doing it for you, she cut him off. I'm doing it because a child shouldn't suffer because your brother was a criminal and you were too proud to ask for help. Adrian flinched. But here's what's going to happen now, Clara continued. You're going to finish this, quietly, quickly. Marion gets her money, her daughter gets the surgery, and then you never speak to her again. Clara, I'm not finished. Her voice was ice. You lied to me. You chose guilt over trust. You decided what I needed to know and what I didn't. And that... Her voice finally cracked. That's not a marriage, Adrian. That's a dictatorship. I was trying to protect you. I didn't need protection. I needed a partner. She was shaking now. I needed someone who trusted me enough to share the hard things, the ugly things. But instead you treated me like I was fragile, like I couldn't handle the truth. You're right. Clara stopped. What? You're right. Adrian stood, his face drawn. I thought I was being noble. I thought I was sparing you, but really, he swallowed hard. Really, I was afraid. Of what? That if you knew the whole truth about my family, about Thomas, about how deep the rot went, you'd leave. He met her eyes. So I hid it, and in hiding it, I became exactly the thing I was afraid you'd leave me for. Silence filled the office. I don't know if I can forgive this, Clara said quietly. I know. And I don't know if I can trust you again. I know that too. She picked up her checkbook. But I'm not leaving, not yet, because walking away now would feel like running, and I don't run. What do you want from me? Adrian asked. Clara looked at him, really looked at him, at the man she'd married, the man who'd lied to her for 6 months, the man who'd broken her trust trying to save a child. The truth, she said, all of it. No more locked drawers, no more secrets, no more deciding what I can handle. She paused. And if you can't do that, if you can't be that person, then we're done. I can, he said immediately. Prove it. Over the next month, Adrian did. He showed her everything. Thomas's full file, the extent of the fraud, the lawyer's warnings, his own financial records showing how much of his personal money he'd already spent on restitution. They had hard conversations, fights that ended without resolution, nights where Clara slept in the guest room because she couldn't bear to be close to him. But slowly, things shifted. Not back to what they'd been. The marriage was gone, shattered the moment Clara walked into the drawing room and saw Marion's terrified face, but towards something new, something built on scar tissue instead of illusion. 6 weeks after Clara's return, Marion's daughter had her surgery. It was successful. Marion sent a brief thank you note, formal, distant, and then disappeared from their lives entirely. Clara was glad, not because she disliked Marion, but because the woman had become a symbol of everything wrong in her marriage. Every time she thought of her, she thought of betrayal. Better to let her vanish into her new life. So, one night, Clara found Adrian in his study. He was burning papers in the fireplace, Thomas's files, now that the restitution was complete. Destroying the evidence? She asked from the doorway. He looked up. Moving on. She watched the flames eat through the documents. Do you regret it? Helping her? No, he said immediately. I regret how I did it, but not the act itself. Clara nodded slowly. That was fair. Do you regret coming back? Adrian asked. She considered. Ask me again in a year. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. They stood together, watching the past burn. And for the first time since that horrible Tuesday in spring, Clara felt something other than anger or hurt. She felt possibility. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but the possibility that they might build something stronger than what they'd lost. If they were both willing to do the work, if neither of them ran from the hard truths. If. That night, Clara slept in their bedroom for the first time in 2 months. Not in Adrian's arms, not with forgiveness spoken, but in the same room, breathing the same air. It was a start. And maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. 3 months after the surgery, Clara received a letter. It arrived on a Thursday. Ironic, since Thursdays had once meant Adrian's late nights and her growing suspicion. Now they meant nothing except another day in the careful reconstruction of a marriage that felt less like home and more like a construction site. The envelope was plain. No return address. Clara opened it standing in the hallway, still wearing her coat from the morning's foundation meeting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Marian's handwriting. Mrs. Blackridge, I know I said I wouldn't contact you again, but you need to know something about the money. It wasn't just for Emma's surgery. There's more. And it involves people who won't stop the way your husband did. Please, for your own safety, look into Hartley and Associates before they look into you. Clara read it twice, then a third time. Her hands were steady when she folded the letter and slipped it into her purse. But something cold had settled in her stomach. Adrian was in his study when she found him, reviewing contracts with the kind of focus he used to reserve for avoiding difficult conversations. He looked up when she entered. "What's Hartley and Associates?" she asked without preamble. The pen in his hand stopped moving. "Where did you hear that name?" "Marian wrote to me." Christ. Adrian stood so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "What did she say?" Clara pulled out the letter and handed it to him, watched his face drain of color as he read. "Adrian, what is Hartley and Associates?" He set the letter down carefully, too carefully. "They're a private equity firm. High-risk investments, mostly offshore accounts. Thomas worked with them before he died." And they're the ones who actually ran the scheme. Thomas was just the front man. Adrian's jaw tightened. "When I started looking into the fraud, I found their name buried in the paperwork, but the lawyers said going after them would be impossible. Shell companies within shell companies. No paper trail that would hold up in court. So you dropped it." "I prioritized Marian. I couldn't fight everyone at once." Clara's mind was already racing ahead. If they ran the scheme, there were other victims, not just Marian. Probably dozens. And if you paid Marian £70,000, they'll want to know where she got it. Adrian finished the thought, his voice grim. They'll assume she found leverage, documentation, something that could expose them. Did she? No. I made sure all the paperwork stayed buried, but he didn't sound convinced. Christ, Clara, I thought this was over. Clara looked at the letter again. For your own safety. What kind of people are we talking about? The kind who don't like loose ends. The cold thing in Clara's stomach turned to ice. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in the darkness, listening to Adrian's breathing beside her, even practiced, the kind of false calm he used when his mind was spinning. She knew because hers was doing the same thing. They'd rebuilt so much in 3 months. Tentative trust. Careful honesty. The fragile framework of a marriage that might actually survive. And now this. We should leave, Adrian said quietly. Clara turned her head. What? Pack up. Go abroad for a while. Let this blow over. Run, you mean? Call it what you want. But if Hartley's involved, staying here is dangerous. Clara sat up, pulling her knees to her chest. We can't run from this. Why not? Because it'll follow us. She looked at him in the dim light from the window. Because if Marian's right, if there are other victims, we're the only ones who know enough to do something about it. Adrian sat up too, running a hand through his hair. Clara, these aren't people you negotiate with. They're not going to sit down for tea and discuss moral accountability. So we do nothing? Let them destroy more lives? I'm trying to protect ours. By hiding again? Her voice rose. By making decisions for both of us without asking what I think? He flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? Clara climbed out of bed, too agitated to stay still. 3 months ago you lied to me because you thought you were protecting me. Now you want to run for the same reason. When do I get a say in my own life? Adrian stood, facing her across the bed. When it's not a choice between your say and your safety. That's not your call to make. The hell it isn't. I'm your husband. Then act like my partner instead of my keeper. They stood there, breathing hard. the space between them charged with all the old arguments dressed in new clothes. Finally, Adrian spoke, his voice quieter. "What do you want to do?" Clara took a breath. Let it out slowly. "I want to find out what Hartley's really involved in. I want to see if there are other victims, and if there are, I want to help them." "That's insane." "Probably. It's dangerous." "I know." "Clara, I'm doing this, Adrian." She met his eyes. "With you or without you?" He stared at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time since she'd come back, not as someone to protect, not as someone to shield from ugly truths, as someone who'd made a choice, and meant it. "You're serious," he said, "completely." Adrian sat back down on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "You're going to get us killed, maybe?" Clara sat beside him, not touching, but close. "Or maybe we'll actually fix something your brother broke. For real this time. Not just one person, all of them." "The lawyer said it was impossible." "The lawyer said it was legally complicated. That's different." Adrian looked at her sideways. "Since when do you know about legal complications?" "Since I married a man who spent 6 months secretly paying restitution to fraud victims." She almost smiled. "I've had time to read." Despite everything, Adrian laughed, short and bitter, but genuine. "You're terrifying, you know that?" "I'm learning." Protect. The next morning, Clara called the one person she knew who understood both power and how to dismantle it. Her father's old solicitor, Richard Pemberton. Pemberton was 72, sharp as a blade, and had spent 40 years defending people who thought themselves untouchable until they weren't. He'd retired 5 years ago, but Clara knew he still kept his hand in certain circles. They met at his club, oak paneling, leather chairs, the smell of old cigars and older money. "Clara Whitmore," Pemberton said when she arrived, using her maiden name the way he always had. "Or should I say Blackridge now?" "Either works." He gestured to the chair across from him. "I heard you married Adrian. Good man. Better than his brother, at least." "You knew Thomas?" "Knew of him. Enough to stay clear." Pemberton studied her over his glasses. "What brings you to me? And don't say social call. You have your mother's face when you're plotting something." Clara didn't waste time. She told him everything. Thomas's fraud, Marion's case, Hartley and Associates, the warning letter. Pemberton listened without interrupting, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You want to go after Hartley," he said finally. "I want to expose them." "That's suicide, Clara." "So I've been told." Pemberton smiled thinly. "Your mother would have said the same thing, right before she did it anyway." He leaned back. "All right, here's what you're up against. Hartley and Associates operates in the gray zone between legal and criminal. They run legitimate fronts, property development, investment consulting, while moving dirty money through offshore accounts. They've been investigated twice. Both times, the cases fell apart before trial. Why? Witnesses recanted, evidence disappeared. One prosecutor took early retirement and bought a villa in Spain. Pemberton's look was pointed. "They don't play nice, Clara." "Neither do I." "I'm serious. These people have reach, money, connections. If you come at them, you better not miss." Clara leaned forward. "Then help me not miss." Pemberton regarded her for a long moment. Then he reached for his phone. "I know someone, former investigator, specializes in financial forensics. If there's a trail, he can find it." "Will he work with us?" "If the price is right." Pemberton made the call, speaking in low tones Clara couldn't quite hear. When he hung up, he wrote an address on a slip of paper. "Marcus Webb, meet him tomorrow at noon. And Clara?" "Yes." "Don't tell Adrian about this yet." She stiffened. "Why not?" "Because if Webb finds what I think he'll find, your husband will try to stop you, and you'll need to be too far in to turn back." Pemberton's eyes were kind but unflinching. "Sometimes protection looks like a cage. Don't let Adrian build you one." Clara kept the meeting from Adrian. She told herself it wasn't lying, just postponing the conversation until she had real information. But the rationalization tasted like ash. Marcus Webb worked out of a cramped office above a betting shop in Whitechapel. Clara found him hunched over 3 computer screens, the room smelling like coffee and electronics. You're Pemberton's girl, he said without looking up. Clara Blackridge. I know who you are. Webb finally turned. He was younger than she'd expected, early 40s, with the kind of eyes that had seen too much and cataloged all of it. You want me to dig into Hartley? Yes. Why? Because they destroyed lives and got away with it. Webb smiled without humor. That's every financial firm in London, sweetheart. Don't call me sweetheart. The smile widened. Fair enough. Sit. Clara sat. Webb pulled up files on one of his screens. Hartley's been running a long con for 15 years. Ponzi schemes dressed up as investment opportunities, pension funds, retirement savings. They target middle-class people, folks with just enough money to be worth stealing but not enough to hire lawyers who scare. How many victims? Best guess? 200. Maybe more. He clicked through spreadsheets. Total losses around £12 million. Clara felt sick. And no one stopped them? Hard to stop what you can't prove. Hartley's good at paperwork. Everything looks legitimate until it isn't. By the time people realize they've been conned, the money's already in the Caymans. What about Thomas Blackridge? Where does he fit? He was one of their recruiters, brought in high-value targets from his social circles. Got a cut of every take. Webb glanced at her. Your husband know you're here? That's not relevant. It is if he tries to shut this down. Pemberton said you wanted documentation, evidence that could hold up in court. That means digging deep, financial records, email trails, witness statements. It's going to get messy. How messy? Hartley will notice. They'll push back, and they don't push gently. Clara thought of Marion's letter, for your own safety. How long will it take? To build a case? 6 months, maybe a year. I don't have a year. Webb raised an eyebrow. Then what do you have? Enough money to make this worth your while, and enough anger to see it through. He studied her. You're serious? Completely. All right. Webb leaned back. But we do this my way. I find the evidence, you stay out of sight. Last thing I need is Hartley figuring out who's funding this before we're ready. Agreed. They shook hands. Webb's grip was firm, calloused from years of typing and digging through other people's secrets. One more thing, he said as she stood to leave. When this blows up, and it will blow up, people you care about are going to get hurt. You ready for that? Clara thought of Adrian, of the fragile peace they'd built, of the trust that was still more hope than reality. No, she said honestly, but I'm doing it anyway. She kept the investigation secret for 3 weeks. In that time, Webb sent her encrypted updates, names of other victims, patterns in the transfers, evidence of shell companies in 6 countries. And in that time, Clara lied to Adrian every single day. Small lies. Where were you this afternoon? Shopping? Who called? Wrong number. You seem distracted. Just tired. Each lie was a brick in a wall she didn't want to build, but she kept building anyway, because Pemberton was right. If Adrian knew, he'd make her stop, and she was too deep in now to walk away. The confrontation came on a Tuesday. Clara was in the study, reviewing Webb's latest report, when Adrian walked in without knocking. Who's Marcus Webb? He asked. Clara's blood went cold. How do you... Us? He called the house, left a message about the Hartley documentation. Adrian's voice was ice. Want to tell me what that means? She closed her laptop slowly. I hired an investigator. You what? Webb's building a case against Hartley. Financial fraud. We have victims willing to testify. We're close to... Are you insane? Adrian crossed the room in 3 strides. Do you have any idea what you've done? I'm finishing what your brother started. What you should have finished. I protected you. You hid from it. Clara stood, matching his anger. You paid off 1 victim and called it justice. But there are dozens more, Adrian, hundreds. And you were going to let them suffer because it was easier than fighting. That's not... He stopped, shook his head. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Then explain it to me. Hartley doesn't lose, Clara. They crush anyone who tries to expose them. Lawsuits, threats, worse. His voice cracked. I can't watch them destroy you. Then don't watch. Help me. Adrian stared at her. You want me to help you commit suicide. I want you to stand beside me for once instead of in front of me. That's not fair. Life isn't fair. Claire's control finally snapped. Those people lost everything because of your brother and his greed. And we have a chance, a real chance, to make it right. But only if you stop trying to protect me from my own decisions. What if you're making the wrong decision? Then I'll live with the consequences. But at least they'll be mine. Silence filled the room. Adrian sank into a chair, his face in his hands. You've been lying to me for 3 weeks. Yes. Meeting with Webb behind my back. Yes. Building a case that could get us both killed. Yes. He looked up. Why? Clara sat across from him. Because I couldn't be the woman who knew the truth and did nothing, even if it cost me everything, even if it cost us. Adrian's eyes were red. You're willing to destroy our marriage for this? I'm willing to risk it. There's a difference. Is there? I think so. Clara reached across the space between them. Didn't quite touch him. Adrian, I know you're scared. I am too. But running won't fix this. Hiding won't make us safe. The only way out is through. Through what? A war we can't win? Through doing the right thing. Even when it's hard. Even when it's dangerous. She paused. Isn't that what you tried to do for Marion? Fix an injustice, no matter the cost? And look how that turned out. It turned out with her daughter alive and healthy, with a wrong partially righted. Claire's voice softened. You didn't finish the job because you were afraid. I'm asking you to be brave enough to finish it now. Adrian was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. If we do this, if we really go after Hartley, there's no going back. I know. They'll come after us. Our reputation, our safety, everything. I know. And you're still willing to do it. Yes. Clara met his eyes. Are you? Adrian didn't answer that night, or the next morning. He retreated into silence, the way he had during those first terrible months when Clara had suspected but didn't know. She let him process, pushed down the fear that he'd choose safety over truth again. 2 days later, he walked into the study where Clara was meeting with Webb over video call. What do you need from me? Adrian asked. Webb looked at Clara. She nodded. Thomas's files, Webb said. Everything you kept. Client lists, financial records, communications with Hartley. We need to trace the full network. They're in a safety deposit box, under attorney-client privilege. Can you break privilege? Adrian's jaw tightened. If I claim I'm acting as executor of Thomas's estate, yes, then do it. Webb's tone left no room for argument. And we need you to reach out to other victims, people who knew Thomas, who might have documentation they don't realize is valuable. That's going to attract attention. Good. Let Hartley know someone's digging. Might make them sloppy. Clara watched Adrian's face, saw him calculating risks, weighing outcomes, every instinct screaming at him to protect what he had left. Then he nodded. I'll get the files tomorrow. Over the next month, they built the case. Adrian contacted every name in Thomas's client list, found 3 more victims willing to testify. Webb traced money through 7 countries, building a paper trail that connected Hartley directly to the fraud. And Hartley noticed. The first warning came via email. Anonymous. Sent to Adrian's work address. Stop asking questions. This is your only warning. Adrian forwarded it to Webb, kept digging. The second warning was less subtle. Someone broke into their house while they were out. Didn't steal anything, just left papers scattered, drawers open. A message. We can reach you anywhere. Clara came home to find Adrian standing in the wreckage of his study, his face pale. We should stop, he said. No. Clara, they're scared. That's why they're threatening us. Because we're getting close. Or because they're about to shut us down permanently. Clara walked through the mess, picking up papers. Then we move faster. I'm not stopping, Adrian. She turned to face him. If you want to walk away, I understand. But I'm seeing this through. He stared at her. At this woman he'd married 7 years ago, who he'd thought he needed to protect, who was now protecting dozens of people he'd never met, at the risk of everything they'd built. You've changed, he said quietly. So have you. Not enough, apparently. Clara set down the papers she was holding. You're still here. That's enough. The third warning came 3 days before they were set to file formal complaints with the Financial Conduct Authority. Clara was alone in the house when the phone rang. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. Mrs. Blackridge. The voice was smooth, male, cultured. My name is James Hartley. I think it's time we talked. Clara's hand tightened on the phone. She should hang up, call Adrian, call Webb, call someone. Instead, she said, I'm listening? Good. Hartley's voice carried the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. I understand you've been making inquiries about my firm, talking to certain people, collecting documentation. Is that illegal? Not at all, just unwise. A pause. Mrs. Blackridge, I knew Thomas. Charming man, terrible judgment. His death was unfortunate, but it doesn't change the fact that he made his own choices. Choices you profited from. Hartley laughed, soft, almost warm. I provide investment opportunities. What people do with them is their responsibility. Thomas understood that. I'm surprised his brother doesn't. Adrian understands perfectly. Does he? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like he's about to make the same mistakes Thomas did. Overreaching, chasing ghosts. The warmth left Hartley's voice, and dragging his wife down with him. Clara moved to the window, scanning the street. Nothing looked out of place, but her skin crawled anyway. What do you want? I want to offer you an out. Walk away now. Forget the documentation. Forget the victims. Forget Marcus Webb. He let that sink in. In return, I'll forget about you. Your husband keeps his reputation. You keep your comfortable life. Everyone wins. Except the people you stole from. They made bad investments. It happens. The market's unpredictable. The market didn't steal 12 million pounds. You did. Silence on the line. When Hartley spoke again, the cultured veneer had cracked. You have 48 hours. After that, the offer expires. And Mrs. Blackridge, I strongly suggest you take it. The line went dead. Clara stood there, phone still pressed to her ear, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd expected threats, expected intimidation. But hearing Hartley's voice, calm, reasonable, absolutely certain of his power, made everything real in a way it hadn't been before. This wasn't a case they were building. It was a war they were starting, and Hartley had just fired the first shot. Adrian came home to find Clara sitting in the dark kitchen, the phone still in her hand. What happened? He asked immediately. She told him. Every word, every pause, every implied threat. When she finished, Adrian was silent for a long moment. Then he picked up his own phone and called Webb. Hartley contacted Clara, he said without preamble. Offered us a deal. We walk away. He leaves us alone. Webb's response was muffled, but Clara caught the gist. What did you say? We didn't say anything yet. That's why I'm calling. Adrian's eyes met Clara's across the kitchen. What are our options? More muffled conversation. Adrian's face darkened. How bad? Pause. Christ. Another pause. And if we file anyway? Adrian listened, his expression growing grimmer with each passing second. Understood. We'll call you back. He hung up. Well? Clara asked. Webb says Hartley only makes offers when he's worried, which means we have more than we think. Adrian sat down heavily. But it also means he's preparing to fight. Webb's sources say Hartley's already hiring a crisis management team, prepping counter-narratives, digging into our backgrounds. Looking for dirt. Looking for ammunition. Adrian rubbed his face. Webb says if we file the complaint, Hartley will retaliate. Hard. Every mistake I've ever made, every questionable decision, it'll be front-page news. Your family's foundation, your father's business dealings, all of it becomes fair game. Clara's stomach turned. My father never did anything illegal. Doesn't matter. Hartley doesn't need truth. He needs doubt. Adrian's voice was hollow. Webb says we should consider the offer seriously, that sometimes walking away is the smart play. Do you want to walk away? I want to keep you safe. That's not what I asked. Adrian met her eyes. No, I don't want to walk away. I want to bury that bastard so deep he never sees daylight again. Something fierce bloomed in Clara's chest. This was the man she'd married. Not the one who hid things, but the one who fought when it mattered. Then we file, she said. Clara, we file. Tomorrow. before Hartley can prepare any more than he already has. You understand what this means? They'll come after us with everything they have. Let them. Adrian stared at her. When did you become so fearless? I'm not fearless. I'm terrified. Clara's voice shook slightly. But I'm more terrified of living the rest of my life knowing I had a chance to do something right and chose comfort instead. They filed the complaint at 9 the next morning. Webb delivered the documentation in person. 3 boxes of evidence, witness statements from 8 victims, financial records tracing Hartley's fraud across 15 years. The FCA investigator who received them was a thin woman in her 50s who'd seen everything twice and believed none of it. You understand this will trigger an investigation, she said, not looking up from the papers. Hartley will be notified. They'll have the right to respond. We understand, Adrian said. And you're prepared for the scrutiny? Your own finances, your connections to Thomas Blackridge, all of it becomes relevant. We're prepared. The investigator finally looked up, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Why are you doing this? You paid restitution to 1 victim already. You could have walked away clean. Clara leaned forward. Because 1 victim isn't enough, and clean isn't the same as right. Something shifted in the investigator's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. I'll expedite the review. Expect Hartley's response within 72 hours. Hartley's response came in 48, not through official channels, through the press. Blackridge heir attempts to cover brother's crimes. Read the headline in the Financial Times. The article was a masterpiece of insinuation, never quite accusing Adrian of anything illegal, but painting him as desperate, guilty by association, willing to destroy a legitimate business to protect his family's reputation. Worse was the Evening Standard. Society wife launches crusade against late husband's business partner. They'd found photos of Clara at charity events, juxtaposed them with images of Hartley's struggling employees who might lose their jobs if the baseless accusations shut down the firm. By noon, Clara's phone was ringing constantly. Reporters, friends asking if she was all right, her mother calling from the south of France in a panic. Clara, what on earth is happening? The papers are saying... The papers are lying, Mother. But Adrian's brother was a criminal. Yes, and the people he worked with are still out there stealing from families who can't afford to lose what they're taking. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Your father would have done the same thing. Clara blinked back sudden tears. I know. But darling, be careful. These kinds of people, they don't fight fair. Neither do I anymore. That's right. The second wave hit that evening. Adrian's firm received a letter from Hartley's legal team. Defamation, tortious interference, calculated damages of £5 million. They were suing not just Adrian, but his company, threatening to freeze assets pending resolution. They can't do this, Adrian said, staring at the paperwork. They just did, his lawyer replied over the phone. And unless you can prove actual malice, they might win. We have documentation of Thomas's fraud, not Hartley's direct involvement. The shell companies create just enough distance that proving Hartley knew about the scheme is going to be difficult. Adrian's hand clenched around the papers. What do we do? Settle. Publicly retract the accusations. Move on. No. Adrian, I said no. He hung up and looked at Clara. Webb needs to find something concrete. Something that ties Hartley directly to the fraud. Not just proximity, actual knowledge, actual control. Webb's been digging for 2 months. If there was something obvious, he'd have found it. Then he needs to dig less obviously. Clara understood what Adrian wasn't saying. You want him to cross legal lines. I want him to find the truth, however he needs to find it. That could invalidate the entire case, make the evidence inadmissible, only if we use it in court. Adrian's eyes were hard. But if we find proof, real proof, Hartley won't want this anywhere near a courtroom. He'll settle quietly. The victims get their money back, we walk away, everyone goes home. Or Hartley uses our illegal methods to bury us completely. It's a risk. It's more than a risk. It's... Clara stopped, looked at her husband, at the man who'd spent months secretly trying to fix his brother's mistakes through legitimate channels, only to watch the guilty walk free. You're willing to break the law. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Something cold settled in Clara's chest. Not fear, recognition. She'd pushed Adrian to fight, and now he was fighting the way cornered men always did, without rules. Call Webb, she said quietly. But Webb came to the house after midnight. They sat in Adrian's study with the curtains drawn, speaking in low voices, even though no one could possibly hear them. You want me to hack Hartley's systems, Webb said flatly. I want you to find evidence, Adrian corrected, by hacking his systems. By accessing information he's clearly hiding. Webb looked at Clara. You on board with this? She wanted to say no. Wanted to be the voice of reason, the one who pulled them back from the edge. But she thought of Marion's letter, of the 200 victims, of the 12 million pounds stolen from people who'd trusted the wrong man. Yes, she said. Webb leaned back, studying them both. You understand what you're asking. If I break into Hartley's servers and he catches me, it's not just my career on the line, it's criminal charges, prison time. We'll pay you double, Adrian said. I don't want your money. I want you to understand the stakes. Webb's voice was sharp. Once we cross this line, there's no going back. Everything we've built, the legitimate case, the FCA complaint, it all becomes tainted. If Hartley finds out, he won't just sue you, he'll destroy you. He's already trying to destroy us, Clara said. Now he has a reason. Webb shook his head. But fine, you want to play dirty? I'll play dirty. Just don't pretend you're the good guys anymore. Webb worked for 3 days. Clara and Adrian went about their lives as normally as possible, which meant enduring pitying looks at the market, whispered conversations at restaurants, friends who suddenly had urgent appointments when they saw Clara coming. The social exile was worse than Clara had expected, not because she cared what most of these people thought, but because the isolation was so complete. 7 years of building a life in this city, and it evaporated in 72 hours. On the third day, Adrian came home to find Clara in the garden, attacking the rose bushes with pruning shears. You're going to kill them, he observed. They're already dying. She cut another branch viciously. Blight! Should have noticed it weeks ago. Adrian sat on the garden bench. You're not talking about the roses. Clara threw down the shears. Everyone thinks we're liars, or fools, or both. We knew this would happen. Knowing doesn't make it easier. She sank onto the bench beside him. I ran into Margaret Thornton at the chemist's today. We've known each other since university. She looked right through me. We'll get through this. Will we? Clara turned to face him. Because right now it feels like we're drowning, and the only thing we're holding on to is the hope that Webb finds something before Hartley crushes us completely. Adrian took her hand. His palm was cold. Webb will find something. And if he doesn't? Then we go down swinging. It wasn't comforting, but it was honest. Clara held onto his hand and stared at the dying roses and tried not to think about all the ways this could end badly. Webb called on the 4th day. I'm in, he said without preamble. Hartley's email server. I need you both to get somewhere you can talk freely. They drove to a park 20 minutes away, found an empty bench far from anyone else, and called Webb back on a burner phone he'd given them. What did you find? Adrian asked. Everything. Webb's voice crackled through the speaker. Hartley's been running this scheme for 20 years, not 15. Started small, penny stocks, pump and dump operations. Graduated to pension funds about 10 years ago. We knew that already. What you didn't know is that he's still running it, right now. New victims every month. And he's not just stealing money, he's laundering it through legitimate businesses, property developments, tech startups. He's got at least 30 million in active circulation. Clara felt sick. 30 million? From current victims. That's not counting what he's already stolen and moved offshore. Webb paused. But here's the problem. All of this is in encrypted emails, communications with his partners, financial ledgers. None of it's going to be admissible in court because I accessed it illegally. Can you prove the encryption wasn't secure? Adrian asked. Make it look like a leak rather than a hack? Maybe. But Hartley's security team will know the difference. And the moment they realize someone's been in their system, they'll purge everything. How long do we have? Maybe a week before they run routine audits and notice the intrusion. After that, it's gone. Clara's mind raced. What if we don't use it in court? What if we use it to find someone on the inside? Someone willing to testify? Webb was quiet for a moment. You want me to find a whistleblower? I want you to find someone who knows what Hartley's doing and hates him enough to burn it all down. That's actually not a bad idea. The sound of typing came through the phone. There's a name that keeps coming up in the emails. Sarah Metcalf, Hartley's chief financial officer. She's been with the firm for 12 years, but in the last 6 months, her emails have changed tone. More questions. Pushing back on decisions. She's having doubts, Clara said. Or she's realizing how deep the fraud goes and doesn't want to be the one holding the bag when it collapses. More typing. I can get you her personal information, home address, phone number, but approaching her is a risk. If she's loyal to Hartley, she'll warn him immediately. And if she's not, Adrian asked, then you might have your whistleblower, but you'll need to move fast before Hartley locks down his systems. Clara looked at Adrian. We do it tonight. Sarah Metcalf lived in a modest townhouse in Clapham, surprising for a CFO of a supposedly successful firm. Clara and Adrian waited across the street until the lights came on at 7:30. What if she calls the police? Adrian asked. Then we leave. Quickly. Clara opened her car door. But if there's a chance she'll listen, we have to try. They crossed the street together. Clara knocked. Clara. The woman who answered was younger than Clara expected. Late 30s, dark circles under her eyes, the look of someone who hadn't slept well in months. Sarah Metcalf? Clara asked. Who's asking? My name is Clara Blackridge. This is my husband, Adrian. We need to talk to you about James Hartley. Sarah's face went white. She tried to close the door. Adrian blocked it with his foot. Please, 5 minutes. That's all we're asking. I don't know what you think I know. We know about the fraud, Clara said quietly. We know about the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the victims. All of it. Sarah's hand trembled on the door. You need to leave. He's stealing from people who can't afford to lose what he's taking, Clara continued. Retirees, families, people who trusted him, and you're helping him do it. I'm not... Sarah stopped, swallowed hard. I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Easy for you to say. You're not the one whose career he'll destroy if you step out of line. Sarah's voice cracked. You don't know what he's capable of. So tell us, Adrian said. Help us stop him. Sarah looked between them, something desperate and terrified in her eyes. For a moment, Clara thought she might actually do it. Then Sarah shook her head. I can't. I'm sorry. I can't. She slammed the door. Clara and Adrian stood on the steps, staring at the closed door. That went well, Adrian said dryly. She's scared, but she's also guilty. Clara turned away. She'll come around. You sound very certain. I am. Clara headed back to the car. Because we're going to give her a reason to be brave. They gave Sarah Metcalf 48 hours. In that time, Webb compiled a dossier, not on Hartley, but on Sarah. Her background, her finances, her sick mother in a care facility that cost £4,000 a month, her brother who'd lost his job 6 months ago and was now living in her spare room. Everything Clara needed to understand exactly why Sarah was trapped, and everything she needed to offer a way out. The second approach came on a Saturday morning. Clara went alone this time. Something about her showing up with Adrian had felt too much like an ambush. She needed this to be a conversation between two women who both understood what it meant to be backed into a corner. Sarah answered the door in pajamas, looking even more exhausted than before. Please don't make me call the police, she said. I'm not here to threaten you, Clara said. I'm here to offer you a deal. Sarah's laugh was bitter. What could you possibly offer me? Protection. Financial support for your mother's care, a job reference that doesn't come from Hartley. Clara paused. And the chance to sleep at night without wondering if you're going to prison when this all falls apart. Sarah's face crumpled. You don't understand what you're asking. Then help me understand. For a long moment, Sarah just stared at her. Then she stepped aside. 5 minutes. Sarah's kitchen was small, cluttered with papers and half-empty coffee cups. She didn't offer Clara a seat. Hartley's not stupid, Sarah said without preamble. He knows how to insulate himself. Every transaction, every account. There are layers between him and the actual fraud. Proving he knew what was happening would require testimony from someone inside the operation. Like you, like me, or his legal team, or the accountants who structure the deals. Sarah's hands shook as she poured herself coffee. But none of us will talk, because Hartley doesn't just threaten your career, he threatens everything, your family, your future. He's got connections, people who make problems disappear. Are you saying he's dangerous? I'm saying that the last person who tried to expose him ended up dead in a car accident. Sarah met Clara's eyes. Thomas Blackridge. The words hit Clara like ice water. What? You think Thomas's crash was random? Hartley had him killed. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. I can't prove it. No one can. But the timing, Thomas was about to go to the authorities. 2 days later, his brakes failed on a country road. Clara's mind spun. Adrian never said. Adrian doesn't know. The police ruled it an accident. No evidence of tampering. But I saw the emails before they were deleted. Hartley asking his security team about loose ends. Thomas's name specifically. Clara sat down heavily. You're sure? Sure enough that I haven't slept properly in 3 years. Sarah's eyes were red. So when you ask me to testify against Hartley, what you're really asking is whether I'm willing to die for it. And the answer is no. I'm sorry, but no. Bull. Clara drove home in a daze. Thomas, murdered. Not an accident, not bad luck. Murdered because he'd tried to do the right thing. Adrian was in the study when she got home. She told him everything, watched his face drain of color, watched his hands start to shake. No, he said. No, that's not. It was an accident. The police investigated. What if they missed something? What if Hartley's good enough to make it look clean? Then we go to them, show them Sarah's testimony. She won't testify. She's too scared. Clara paced the room. And I don't blame her. If Hartley killed Thomas, we don't know that he did. But we don't know that he didn't. Clara's voice rose. Adrian, we're playing a game we don't understand with a man who might be a murderer. What the hell are we doing? Adrian stood, grabbed her shoulders. We're fighting. That's what we're doing. Fighting for people who can't fight for themselves. And if we die doing it, then at least we die for something that matters. Clara stared at him. At the man who'd hidden from conflict for months, who was now ready to die for a principle. When did you become so reckless? She asked. When I watched my wife become so brave. He pulled her close. I'm not stopping, Clara. Not now. Not when we're this close. She wanted to argue, wanted to be the reasonable one, the one who pulled them back from the edge. But she was tired of being reasonable. Neither am I, she said. Webb called 2 hours later. Hartley knows someone was in his system, he said without preamble. He's purging everything. Emails, financial records, gone. Whatever we don't have already, we're not getting. Do we have enough? Adrian asked. Depends on your definition of enough. I've got proof of the current scheme, names of victims, transaction records. But nothing that proves Hartley personally ordered it. Nothing that would hold up in court without corroborating testimony. What about Sarah Metcalf? Won't talk. I already tried. Webb's frustration bled through the phone. Without her or someone like her, we've got circumstantial evidence and illegal hacking. Hartley's lawyers will tear it apart. Clara closed her eyes. They were so close. And still not close enough. There has to be someone else, she said. Someone who knows what Hartley's doing and hates him enough to burn it all down. If there is, they're hiding, and we're out of time to find them. Silence filled the study. Then Adrian spoke, his voice quiet and dangerous. What if we make Hartley come to us? Webb went quiet. What are you thinking? We leak the documentation, not to the authorities, to the press. Make it public. Force Hartley to respond. That's insane, Webb said. It'll work, Adrian insisted. Hartley's power comes from operating in shadows. We drag him into the light, he'll panic, make mistakes. And when he does, he'll also come after you with everything he has, Webb cut in. No more subtle threats, no more legal maneuvers. If you expose him publicly, he'll destroy you. Let him try. Clara looked at her husband, really looked at him. Adrian, if we do this, if we really make this public, we can't take it back. Our lives as we know them are over. I know. Our friends, Our reputation. Everything we've built. I know. He met her eyes. But 200 people lost everything because my brother helped Hartley steal it, and I've spent 3 years trying to fix it quietly, properly, through the right channels, and none of it worked. His voice hardened. So yes, let's burn it all down. At least then something good comes from the ashes. Clara thought of Marion, of Emma's surgery, of the 12 million pounds Hartley had stolen and the lives he'd ruined, of Thomas, dead in a car that maybe wasn't an accident. Do it, she told Webb. The story broke 48 hours later, not in the Financial Times or the Evening Standard, but everywhere. Webb had sent the documentation to a dozen journalists simultaneously, financial crimes reporters, investigative units, even a few foreign papers. By noon, Hartley and Associates was front-page news. Investment firm accused of 20-year fraud scheme. Whistleblowers allege millions stolen from pensioners. Hartley, under investigation for financial crimes. Clara watched the coverage from their living room, Adrian beside her. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanting comments, lawyers demanding explanations, friends asking if they'd lost their minds. Adrian had unplugged the landline. They let the mobiles ring themselves to death. No going back now, Clara said. No, Adrian agreed. They sat in the wreckage of their carefully constructed lives and waited for Hartley's response. It came at sunset, not a phone call, not a legal threat. A brick through their front window. Glass exploded across the foyer. Clara screamed, diving away from the shards. Adrian pulled her behind the sofa, shielding her with his body. For a moment, there was only the sound of broken glass settling. Then Clara saw the note wrapped around the brick. Adrian got to it first. Read it. His face went white. What does it say? Clara asked. He showed her. 2 words, written in red ink that might have been marker, or might have been something worse. You're next. Clara stared at the words until they blurred. Adrian was already on his phone, calling the police. His voice clipped and controlled in that way that meant he was barely holding it together. She picked up the brick. Heavy, cold, real. Someone had thrown this through their window. Someone had stood on their street, in their neighborhood, and hurled a physical threat into their home. And the police, when they arrived 20 minutes later, treated it like vandalism. Probably kids, the younger officer said, photographing the broken window. You'd be surprised how often this happens after someone's name is in the papers. This wasn't kids, Adrian said tightly. The note suggests otherwise. Teenagers think this sort of thing is funny. The officer pocketed his camera. We'll file a report, increase patrols in the area, but unless you have security footage showing who did it, we know who did it, Clara said. James Hartley. The officers exchanged glances. Ma'am, we can't make accusations without evidence. The evidence is in every newspaper in London. Clara's control cracked. Hartley's being investigated for fraud. We're the ones who exposed him. And now someone's threatening us. You don't think those things are connected? What I think doesn't matter. What I can prove does. The older officer closed his notepad. Get the window fixed. Install cameras if it makes you feel safer. But unless something else happens... Something else like what? Adrian demanded. Do we have to wait until we're actually hurt before you take this seriously? The officers left without answering. Clara and Adrian stood in their foyer, glass crunching under their feet, staring at the plywood Adrian had already called someone to install over the broken window. We're on our own, Clara said quietly. We always were. Webb arrived within the hour, carrying equipment Clara didn't recognize. Cameras, he explained, unpacking boxes. Motion sensors, panic buttons linked directly to my phone. If anyone comes within 10 feet of this house, I'll know about it. You think they'll come back? Clara asked. I think throwing a brick was a warning. Next time might be worse. Webb started installing a camera above the front door. You two need to be smart about this. Vary your routes. Don't go anywhere alone. And for the love of everything, stop answering the door without checking who's there first. Adrian helped him mount another camera by the back entrance. How long until Hartley makes his next move? He already is. I've been monitoring his communications. What's left of them? He's in full crisis mode. Hired 3 different PR firms. His lawyers are drafting defamation suits against every outlet that ran the story. Can he win? Clara asked. Depends on how much money he wants to burn. But that's not his real play. Webb secured a sensor to the window frame. His real play is making you look crazy, obsessed, vindictive. He's already seeding stories about how you're trying to destroy him to cover up your husband's family's crimes. That's insane. It's effective. People love a villain redemption arc. And Hartley's spinning himself as the victim of a witch hunt led by a grieving widow who can't accept her brother-in-law's guilt. Clara felt sick. I'm not grieving. I never even met Thomas. Doesn't matter. The narrative matters. Webb finished with the sensor and moved to the next window. But here's the thing. Hartley's scrambling. That brick? That's desperation. He's losing control of the story, and he knows it. So what do we do? Adrian asked. We keep him off balance. Feed the press more documentation. Get victims on record. Make this so big he can't bury it. Webb glanced at Clara. And we find Sarah Metcalf again. Because if Hartley's panicking, she might be ready to jump ship. Sarah Metcalf's house was dark when Clara arrived the next morning. No car in the drive, no lights, no sign of life. Clara knocked anyway. Waited. Knocked again. Nothing. She was about to leave when a neighbor emerged from the house next door, an elderly woman with a terrier on a leash. If you're looking for Sarah, she left yesterday, the woman said. Packed 2 suitcases and drove off without a word. Very unlike her. Clara's stomach dropped. Did she say where she was going? Didn't say anything, just loaded her car and left. The woman studied Clara with sharp eyes. Are you a friend of hers? Something like that. Well, if you find her, tell her Mr. Pickles misses her. She usually brings him treats. The woman tugged the terrier away. Clara stood on Sarah's empty doorstep and called Webb. She ran, she said when he answered. Hartley got to her. Or she got smart and realized staying was suicide. Clara walked back to her car. Either way, we lost our whistleblower. Maybe not. Webb's keyboard clacked in the background. Sarah's phone is still active. I can track it. Give me 10 minutes. Clara waited in her car, watching Sarah's dark house and trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Webb called back in 8 minutes. She's in Brighton. Checked into a bed and breakfast under her own name, which is either very stupid or very deliberate. Which do you think? I think she wants to be found. By you, specifically. Clara started the engine. Text me the address. Chat. The bed and breakfast was a shabby Victorian conversion 2 blocks from the seafront. Clara found Sarah sitting on the porch, smoking a cigarette with shaking hands. I don't smoke, Sarah said when Clara approached. Haven't in 10 years. But I bought a pack this morning and I can't seem to stop. Clara sat beside her without asking permission. Why did you run? Because staying meant dying. Sarah took a long drag. Hartley called me. Said if I talked to anyone, press, police, you, he'd make sure I regretted it. Then he reminded me about Thomas's accident. Very specifically reminded me. So you're hiding. I'm surviving. Sarah stubbed out the cigarette and immediately lit another. Do you know what it's like? Knowing someone's capable of murder and having to smile at him every morning, pretend everything's fine? I've been doing it for 3 years and I can't... Her voice cracked. I can't do it anymore. Clara chose her words carefully. What if I told you we could protect you? You can't. We can try. Webb's good at what he does. And the police won't do anything until I'm already dead. Sarah's laugh was bitter. And even then, Hartley will make it look like an accident, just like Thomas. Then help us put him away, testify, give us what we need to make sure he can't hurt anyone else. Sarah turned to look at her, eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. You really think you can win this? I think we're the only ones trying. For a long moment, Sarah just smoked, stared at the ocean in the distance. Finally, she spoke. I have copies of everything, emails, financial records, voice recordings of Hartley instructing me to falsify reports. She met Clara's eyes. I've been documenting it all for 2 years. Insurance, in case he ever tried to make me the fall guy. Clara's heart hammered. Where are they? Safe. Multiple locations. Cloud storage under fake names. Physical copies in 3 different safety deposit boxes. Sarah's hands shook as she took another drag. I was going to take them to the police after I had enough saved to disappear. Start over somewhere Hartley couldn't reach me. How much do you have saved? Enough to survive 6 months, maybe. Clara made a decision. What if we gave you enough to disappear properly? New identity, Relocation costs. Your mother's care covered for the next 5 years. In exchange for what? Everything you have on Hartley, and your testimony when the time comes. Sarah laughed, but there were tears in her eyes. You're asking me to sign my own death warrant. I'm asking you to help save 200 people from the same thing that's eating you alive. Clara leaned forward. You said you can't do this anymore, so don't. Help us end it. Sarah was quiet for a long time. The ocean crashed in the distance, seagulls cried overhead. The cigarette burned down to the filter. If I do this, Sarah said finally, I want witness protection, real protection, not just Webb watching my back, actual police involvement. We'll make it happen. And I want it in writing. What you're promising, the money, the relocation, all of it. Done. Sarah stubbed out her cigarette. Then let's burn this bastard to the ground. They worked fast. Sarah retrieved her documentation from 3 separate locations over 2 days. Safety deposit boxes in London, Manchester, and Edinburgh. Each cache was carefully organized. Emails sorted by date and subject. Financial records cross-referenced with transaction IDs. Voice recordings transcribed and annotated. Webb integrated it all into their existing case file. The result was devastating. Hartley hadn't just run a Ponzi scheme. He'd orchestrated a network of them, each feeding into the next. Money stolen from pensioners funded fake tech startups. Those startups attracted new investors whose money paid earlier victims. And when the whole thing threatened to collapse, Hartley simply created new schemes to keep the cycle going. The voice recordings were the smoking gun. Hartley's voice, clear and unmistakable, instructing Sarah to forge documents, to lie to auditors, to create shell companies that existed only on paper. And in one recording, dated 6 months after Thomas's death, Hartley discussing loose ends with someone Sarah identified as his head of security. The last one was messy, Hartley's voice said through the static. Too public. Next time we handle it quietly. Next time might not be necessary, the security chief replied. Blackridge's brother doesn't know anything. Let's keep it that way. Clara listened to the recording 3 times, her blood turning to ice each time. Adrian listened once, then left the room. She found him in the garden, standing among the dying roses he'd been meaning to replace for months. He killed Thomas, Adrian said without turning around. I always knew something was off. The timing, the way the investigation closed so quickly. But I told myself I was being paranoid, that grief was making me see conspiracies where there were none. Clara touched his shoulder. You couldn't have known. I should have. He turned and his eyes were red. Thomas came to me 2 weeks before he died. Said he was in trouble. That he'd gotten involved with people he shouldn't have. I told him to handle it himself, that I was done cleaning up his messes. Adrian, if I'd listened, if I'd helped him instead of turning him away, you'd probably be dead too. Clara gripped his arms. Hartley would have killed you both. The only reason you're alive now is because you didn't know enough to be a threat. And now I do. Now we do. Clara's voice hardened. So let's make sure Thomas's death wasn't for nothing. They delivered the full documentation to the FCA on a Thursday morning, exactly 4 months after Clara had first walked into the drawing room and seen Marian's terrified face. The same thin investigator received them, but this time her expression was different, sharper, interested. This is substantial, she said, paging through the files. We'll need to verify everything, of course, authenticate the recordings, trace the financial transactions, but if it's legitimate, it's legitimate, Sarah said quietly. She'd insisted on coming, despite the risk. I'm prepared to testify to all of it. The investigator looked at her. You understand what that means? Public testimony, criminal trial, your name in every paper. I understand. And you're willing to accept witness protection? I'm demanding it. Something that might have been approval flickered across the investigator's face. All right, we'll fast-track this. I can't promise how long it'll take, but with evidence this concrete... She paused. You might actually pull this off. Go on. The news broke 3 days later. Not through the press this time. Through official channels. The FCA announced a formal investigation into Hartley and Associates, froze their accounts, seized their records, issued a public statement about credible evidence of systematic fraud spanning 2 decades. Clara watched the coverage from Webb's office. They'd moved there after the brick incident, figuring it was safer than home. How long until they arrest him? She asked. Depends on how fast they work. Could be weeks, could be months. Webb scrolled through news feeds. But the account freeze is huge. Hartley can't move money, can't pay his lawyers, can't run. He's trapped. Adrian was on the phone with their lawyer discussing Sarah's protection arrangements. When he hung up, he looked exhausted but grimly satisfied. Sarah's in a safe house, armed guards, new identity being processed. He sat down heavily. She gave a statement this morning, 6 hours, walked them through everything. Will it stick? Claire asked. The lawyer thinks so. Between Sarah's testimony and the documentation, they have enough to charge Hartley with fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering, maybe more. What about Thomas? Adrian's jaw tightened. Proving murder when the original investigation ruled it an accident is harder. But the lawyer says if they can establish a pattern of witness intimidation, they might reopen the case, Webb finished. And with that recording, they have motive and opportunity. Clara felt something loosen in her chest. Not quite relief. It was too early for that. But possibility. The sense that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't going to end with them destroyed. Hartley's response came 48 hours later. Not through lawyers, not through the press. Through a phone call to Clara's mobile at 2 a.m. She answered without thinking, still half asleep. Mrs. Blackridge. Hartley's voice was different now. The cultured smoothness was gone, replaced by something raw and dangerous. You've made a very serious mistake. Clara sat up, fully awake. Adrian stirred beside her. The only mistake was thinking you'd get away with this forever. Get away with what? Running a business? Providing investment opportunities? Hartley's laugh was ugly. You've destroyed my reputation based on the word of a disgruntled employee and fabricated evidence. The evidence isn't fabricated, and Sarah's not the only one willing to talk. Sarah Metcalf is a liar who embezzled from my company and is trying to cover her tracks by blaming me. His voice dropped. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that you've declared war on the wrong man. You started this war 20 years ago, and I'll finish it. The line went dead. Clara sat in the darkness, her heart pounding. Adrian was already up, calling Webb. Hartley just threatened Clara directly. We need... His phone beeped. Incoming message. They both stared at the screen. A photo, taken from outside their house, showing Webb's security cameras. And a caption. Nice try. He knows where you are, Webb said when they arrived at his office 30 minutes later. Knows about the security, knows I'm helping you. How? Adrian demanded. Could be anything. Tail on your car, hack into my systems, bribe someone in the police. Webb was already packing equipment. Doesn't matter. What matters is you're not safe. Where do we go? Clara asked. I have a place. Off the grid. No lease in my name, no digital footprint. You stay there until the FCA makes their move. How long? Could be days. Could be weeks. Clara thought of their house, their lives, everything they'd built. We can't just hide. You can if you want to survive. Webb's voice was sharp. Hartley's desperate. Desperate men do desperate things. That brick was a warning. This photo is an escalation. Next time he might actually hurt us, Adrian finished. I get it. They packed in silence. Essentials only. Clothes, laptops. The documentation in case they needed to reference it. Clara looked around their bedroom one last time before they left. 7 years of marriage, 7 years of building a life together. All of it reduced to 2 suitcases and the hope that they'd survive long enough to come home. Webb's safe house was a converted warehouse in Rotherhithe, industrial area, mostly commercial buildings, hardly any residential traffic. Inside it was surprisingly comfortable. Basic furniture, strong locks, windows covered with steel shutters. I use it for witnesses sometimes, Webb explained, showing them the bedroom. People who need to disappear for a while. How often does that work? Clara asked. More often than not. He handed Adrian a burner phone. This is your only communication device while you're here. Don't call anyone except me. Don't access your email. Don't do anything that could be traced. They settled in. Adrian set up his laptop, offline, as Webb had instructed. Clara tried to read but couldn't focus. By the third day, she was climbing the walls. "We can't just sit here," she said over breakfast, if cereal and instant coffee could be called breakfast. "Hartley's out there, destroying evidence, intimidating witnesses." "The FCA has him locked down," Adrian reminded her. "Accounts frozen, records seized." "That doesn't stop him from hurting people." Clara paced the small space. "Sarah's in protection, but what about the other victims? What about Marion? If Hartley's desperate enough..." "Marion's gone. You said so yourself." "I said she left. That doesn't mean she's safe." Clara grabbed her phone, the burner Webb had given her. "I'm calling Webb. We need to make sure Marion's protected." The call went to voicemail. Clara tried again, same result. "That's weird," Adrian said. "Webb always answers." Clara tried a third time. Nothing. They looked at each other. "Maybe he's in a meeting," Adrian suggested, but he didn't sound convinced. Clara was already grabbing her coat. "Or maybe something's wrong." Webb's office was dark when they arrived. The door was locked, but the small window beside it was cracked. Not broken, just slightly ajar, as if someone had forced it open and tried to close it again. "We should call the police," Adrian said. Clara was already pushing the door open. Inside, the office was chaos. Computers smashed, files scattered, furniture overturned. And in the middle of it all, Webb. He was alive, barely. Blood matted his hair, his face was swollen. He was conscious enough to recognize them. "Took their time," he rasped. Clara dropped to her knees beside him. "What happened?" "Hartley's men, looking for Sarah's location." Webb coughed and blood flecked his lips. "Didn't tell them." Jesus Christ. Adrian was already calling an ambulance. "How long ago?" "Hour, maybe 2. Webb grabbed Clara's arm with surprising strength. "They know about the safe house. You need to run." Clara's blood turned to ice. "How do they know?" "Found the lease. Hidden, but not well enough." Another cough. "Go! Now!" Sirens wailed in the distance. Adrian pulled Clara to her feet. "We can't just leave him," she protested. "We can't help him if we're dead." Adrian dragged her toward the door. "Move." They ran. They made it back to the safe house with maybe 10 minutes to spare. "Pack everything," Adrian ordered. "We're leaving." "Where are we going?" "I don't know. Somewhere. Anywhere." Clara threw their belongings into bags while Adrian checked the windows. His face went white. "They're here." Clara looked. 2 cars. Parked at either end of the street. Men standing beside them. Waiting. "Back door," Adrian said. They grabbed their bags and ran for the rear exit. Adrian yanked it open and found 2 more men standing in the alley. They were trapped. Clara's mind raced. Windows were barred. Front door was suicide. Back door was blocked. That left up. "The roof," she said. Adrian looked at her like she was insane. "We're 3 stories up. And the building next door is 2. Clara was already heading for the stairs. We climbed down from there. They made it to the roof as someone started pounding on the front door. The gap between buildings was maybe 6 feet. Doable. Barely. Adrian went first, jumping across and landing hard on the adjacent roof. Clara followed, her heart in her throat, sure she was going to fall. She didn't. They climbed down the fire escape of the neighboring building and emerged onto a different street. No cars. No men. They ran until Clara's lungs burned, found a taxi, gave an address 3 blocks from where they actually wanted to go. A hotel Adrian had stayed at for business once, anonymous and cheap. They checked in under fake names and collapsed in the room. "We can't keep running," Clara said, gasping for breath. "I know. Hartley's not going to stop until we're dead." "I know. So what do we do?" Adrian sat up slowly, his face grim. "We go on the offensive." The plan came together over the next 6 hours. Clara called the one journalist who'd been most aggressive about covering the Hartley story, a woman named Rachel Pierce who worked for The Guardian. Rachel had left 3 messages asking for interviews. Now Clara was ready to give her one. "Everything," Clara said when Rachel answered. "I'll tell you everything. The fraud, the victims, Sarah's testimony, Webb's assault, all of it." "When?" Rachel asked immediately. "Now, tonight, before Hartley can silence us. They met in a pub in Camden, public enough to be safe, quiet enough to talk. Rachel brought a photographer and a voice recorder. Start from the beginning, Rachel said. Clara did. Told her about finding Adrian with Marion, about discovering Thomas's fraud, about Marion's letter and Webb's investigation and Sarah's documentation, about the brick, the threats. Webb beaten bloody, about running for their lives from men who'd already killed once and wouldn't hesitate to kill again. Adrian filled in the parts Clara missed, the details about Thomas's death, the evidence connecting Hartley to murder. Rachel took notes, her eyes sharp. This is explosive. You understand that? That's the point, Clara said. It's also dangerous. Hartley will sue for defamation. Let him. We have documentation, witnesses, recordings. Clara leaned forward. The only way we survive this is if the whole world knows the truth. Once it's public, really public, Hartley can't make us disappear without everyone knowing exactly who did it. Rachel studied them both. You're using me as insurance. We're using the truth as insurance. You're just the delivery system. When can you run the story? Adrian asked. Tomorrow morning, front page. Rachel closed her notebook. But you need to be somewhere safe when it hits. Hartley's going to lose his mind. We will be. Where? Clara met Adrian's eyes. The police station, filing a formal complaint about the assault on Marcus Webb and the threats against us. Will they listen? They will when they read your article. The story ran at 6 a.m. Claire and Adrian read it from a conference room at the police station, where they'd been waiting since midnight to give their statements. Investment mogul accused of fraud, witness intimidation, and possible murder. Rachel hadn't pulled any punches. Everything was there. Thomas's suspicious death, the 200 victims, Sarah's testimony, the assault on Webb, and photos. Clara and Adrian looking exhausted but defiant. Sarah, face blurred for protection. Webb in his hospital bed, bruised and bandaged, but alive. The article ended with a direct challenge. James Hartley claims he's the victim of a vendetta. The evidence suggests otherwise. The question now is whether British authorities will act or whether wealth and connections will, once again, place someone above the law. By 8 a.m., it had been picked up by every major outlet. By 9, politicians were calling for investigations. By 10, the FCA issued a statement confirming that criminal charges were imminent. And by noon, James Hartley was arrested. Clara and Adrian watched it on the news from the police station, Hartley being led out of his office in handcuffs, his face contorted with rage, cameras flashing. The detective who'd been taking their statement stuck his head in. You two can go. We have everything we need. Just like that? Clara asked. Just like that. The FCA is taking the lead on prosecution. We're handling the assault on Mr. Webb and investigating the threats against you. He paused. For what it's worth, you did good. Most people would have taken the settlement and walked away. We're not most people, Adrian said. They went to see Webb in the hospital that afternoon. He was awake, alert, and in significantly better shape than he'd been 12 hours ago. You're insane, he said when they walked in. Going public like that? You could have gotten yourselves killed. But we didn't, Clara said. And now Hartley's in custody. Awaiting bail hearing, his lawyers are already working on getting him released. Even after everything that's come out? Money buys good lawyers buy freedom. Webb shifted in his bed, wincing. Don't celebrate yet. This isn't over. But we're winning, Adrian said. You're surviving. That's not the same thing. Webb looked between them. Hartley's going to fight this with everything he has. It'll be months before trial, maybe years, and in the meantime, we keep fighting, Clara finished, because that's what we do now. Webb smiled, despite the pain it clearly caused. Yeah, I guess it is. They went home that evening, their real home, not the safe house. The window had been repaired, the glass cleaned up. But the sense of violation remained. Adrian stood in the foyer, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. Feels different. It is different. Clara set down her bag. We're different. Think we'll ever feel safe here again? I don't know. Clara walked to the window, looking out at their street, at the normal houses with normal people living normal lives. But I think maybe safety isn't the point anymore. What is? Justice. She turned to face him. We started this because we wanted to fix what Thomas broke. Wanted to help Marion, but it became bigger than that. 200 victims. 200 families. Clara crossed to him. We can't undo what Hartley did. Can't give those people back the years they lost or the security he stole, but we can make sure he pays for it. Adrian pulled her close. When did you become so fierce? When I married a man who taught me that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard, even when it costs everything. They stood in their damaged home, holding each other, and for the first time in months, Clara felt something like hope. Not that everything would be okay, not that the trial would be easy or that Hartley would definitely lose, but that they'd done what they could, fought as hard as they knew how, and survived. For now, that was enough. The phone rang. Clara almost didn't answer. They'd been ignoring calls for days, but something made her pick up. Mrs. Blackridge? A woman's voice, tentative, familiar. Marion? I saw the news about Hartley. A pause. I wanted to say thank you for not letting this go, for finishing what we started. Clara sank into a chair, unexpected tears burning her eyes. How's Emma? Perfect. Completely recovered. Starting school in the fall. Marion's voice cracked. Because of what you did, what you risked. We didn't do it alone. But you did it when you could have walked away. A longer pause. I'm sorry for the letter, for getting you involved in this. Don't be. You gave us a chance to do something that mattered. Clara looked at Adrian, who was watching her with quiet intensity. You gave us a chance to be better than we were. After Marion hung up, Clara sat in the growing darkness, thinking about the past 4 months, about the woman she'd been, comfortable, cautious, willing to look away from hard truths, and the woman she'd become. The phone rang again. This time it was Rachel Pierce. Just got word from my source at the FCA, Rachel said. They're denying Hartley bail, citing flight risk and witness intimidation. Clara's breath caught. He's staying in custody? Until trial, which my source says will be fast-tracked given the public interest. Rachel paused. You won, Clara. Not the war, maybe, but this battle. When Clara hung up, Adrian was already opening a bottle of wine they'd been saving for an occasion they weren't sure would ever come. To survival, he said, pouring 2 glasses. To justice, Clara countered. To us, Adrian amended, for being too stubborn to know when to quit. They drank to that. To stubbornness, to justice, to the strange, fierce thing their marriage had become. And in the quiet of their damaged home, they began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd actually done it. The trial began on a cold morning in November, 8 months after Hartley's arrest. Clara wore navy, not because anyone had told her to, but because black felt too funereal and anything bright felt obscene. Adrian sat beside her in the public gallery, his hand finding hers as the bailiff called the court to order. Hartley entered in a gray suit that probably cost more than most people earned in a month. He looked thinner, older, but his eyes, when they swept the courtroom, were still sharp, still calculating. They landed on Clara for just a moment. She didn't look away. The charges were read. 15 counts of fraud, 8 counts of money laundering, 6 counts of witness intimidation. The prosecutor, a severe woman named Victoria Chen, who'd made her career dismantling financial criminals, laid out the case with surgical precision. The evidence will show that James Hartley orchestrated a scheme of breathtaking scope and cruelty, Chen said in her opening statement. For 20 years, he stole from people who trusted him. Pensioners, families, people who believed they were investing in their futures. Instead, they were funding Mr. Hartley's lifestyle, while their own savings disappeared into shell companies and offshore accounts. Hartley's defense attorney, an expensive shark named Reginald Cross, countered with equal force. My client is a successful businessman being scapegoated by people looking for someone to blame for their own poor decisions, Cross said smoothly. Thomas Blackridge ran the fraudulent scheme. Mr. Hartley, if anything, was another victim. And now, because of a vendetta by the Blackridge family, an innocent man sits accused of crimes he did not commit. Clara's jaw tightened. Adrian squeezed her hand. The first week was procedural, jury selection, preliminary motions, legal arguments about what evidence could be admitted. Clara and Adrian attended every session. So did Webb, still walking with a slight limp from the beating. So did 3 of the victims willing to testify publicly, including an elderly man named Peter Harrington, who'd lost his entire pension to Hartley's scheme. And on Friday afternoon, Sarah Metcalf took the stand. But Sarah looked different. Her hair was shorter, darker. She wore glasses she hadn't worn before, part of her new identity, Clara guessed. But her voice was steady when she swore the oath. Chen began gently. Ms. Metcalf, can you describe your role at Hartley and Associates? I was the chief financial officer for 12 years. And in that role, what were your responsibilities? Oversight of all financial operations, managing accounts, preparing reports for investors and regulators. Did those responsibilities ever include activities you knew to be illegal? Sarah's hands tightened on the witness stand rail. Yes. Can you give the court an example? Mr. Hartley instructed me to create false financial statements, to show returns that didn't exist, to transfer money between accounts to hide losses. Cross objected. Hearsay, Your Honor. I have recordings, Sarah said before the judge could rule, of Mr. Hartley giving me these instructions directly. The courtroom stirred. Chen played the first recording, Hartley's voice, unmistakable, telling Sarah to adjust the Q3 numbers and make sure the pensioner accounts show growth, even if you have to borrow from the offshore reserve. Clara watched Hartley's face. He didn't flinch, didn't react. Just sat there, like he was listening to weather reports. Cross-examined Sarah for 3 hours. Attacked her credibility. Suggested she'd fabricated the recordings. Implied she was the real criminal trying to shift blame. Isn't it true you embezzled over 50,000 pounds from Hartley and Associates? Cross demanded. No. Yet you have multiple bank accounts in false names. Because I was afraid Mr. Hartley would kill me if I tried to leave. Sarah's voice cracked, just like he killed Thomas Blackridge. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel. Cross demanded the statement be stricken. But it was out there now. In the record. In everyone's minds. The prosecution built their case over 3 weeks. Financial experts testified about the shell companies and offshore transfers. Victims testified about the money they'd lost and the lives destroyed. Webb testified about tracing the fraud and the assault that had nearly killed him. And then, in week 4, they played the recording Sarah had kept hidden until the very end. Hartley's voice. The last one was messy, too public. Next time we handle it quietly. The security chief. Next time might not be necessary. Blackridge's brother doesn't know anything. Hartley. Let's keep it that way. Chen paused the recording. Ms. Metcalf, in your professional opinion, what were they discussing? Thomas Blackridge's death, Sarah said quietly. Mr. Hartley had him killed because Thomas was going to expose the fraud. Cross objected furiously. Speculation, no foundation. The prosecution will demonstrate foundation, Chen replied calmly. She called her next witness, a mechanic named David Foster who'd been Thomas's regular service provider. Foster testified that 2 days before Thomas's death, he'd performed a full brake inspection. Everything was perfect. I told him so myself. And yet the police report from the accident cited brake failure, Chen said. Yes. In your professional opinion, could brakes fail that catastrophically 48 hours after a clean inspection? Not unless someone tampered with them. The jury looked at Hartley. For the first time, Clara saw something flicker in his expression. Not quite fear, but close. Well, the defense put up a fight. They called character witnesses who praised Hartley's philanthropy and business acumen. They brought in their own financial experts who argued the transactions were legitimate. They even called 2 former employees who swore Sarah had been difficult and vindictive. But Cross's biggest weapon was Adrian. He called Adrian to the stand on a Tuesday morning, and Clara knew immediately where this was going. Mr. Blackridge, you loved your brother, didn't you? Cross began. Yes. And his death devastated you. Of course. So much so that you've spent the past few years trying to blame someone, anyone, for it, rather than accept it was an accident. Adrian's jaw tightened. That's not what happened. Isn't it? You paid 70,000 pounds to one of your brother's victims, not out of legal obligation, but guilt. Guilt that you didn't help him when he asked. Objection, Chen called. Argumentative. Sustained, the judge said, but the damage was done. Cross pressed on. You've admitted you didn't help your brother when he came to you. You turned him away, and 2 weeks later he died. Isn't this entire prosecution just an attempt to assuage your own guilt by destroying the man your brother worked with? No. Then why did you start investigating Hartley and Associates only after your wife discovered your secret meetings with Marion Hale? Were you trying to deflect from your own deception? Adrian's face went red. I was trying to fix what my brother broke. Or were you trying to fix your marriage by finding someone else to blame? That's enough, Adrian snapped. My brother was murdered. Your client killed him. And you sitting here twisting everything doesn't change that. The judge intervened. Cross smirked like he'd gotten exactly what he wanted. Clara watched the jury. Half of them looked sympathetic to Adrian. The other half looked uncertain. It was close, dangerously close. The prosecution rested after 5 weeks. Chen's closing argument was measured, methodical, devastating. She walked the jury through every piece of evidence, every recording, every testimony. Built an unassailable case that Hartley had knowingly, deliberately stolen millions of pounds from people who trusted him. This isn't about Thomas Blackridge's guilt or Adrian Blackridge's motivations, she said. This is about whether James Hartley committed fraud. The evidence says yes. Your verdict should, too. Cross's closing was pure theater. He painted Hartley as a victim of circumstance, Sarah as a criminal mastermind, and Adrian as a grief-stricken man on a vendetta. Reasonable doubt, Cross repeated 3 times. That's all you need, and the prosecution hasn't met that burden. They've given you innuendo and coincidence, and the word of a woman who admits to creating false financial statements. He sat down looking confident. The jury deliberated for 4 days. Clara thought she'd go insane during the wait. She and Adrian stayed in a hotel near the courthouse, unable to face going home only to be called back. Webb joined them on day 2, bringing takeaway food they barely touched. Stop checking your phone, Webb said on day 3. They'll call when they're ready. What if they acquit him? Clara asked for the 100th time. Then we appeal. Or we go after his civil assets, or we... It won't be enough. Clara stood, pacing the small room. Those people need to know justice exists, that someone who stole their futures actually pays for it. Adrian pulled her down beside him. We did everything we could. But what if it's not enough? He didn't have an answer for that. The call came on day 4 mid-afternoon. The jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom was packed when they returned. Victims filled the gallery. Press lined the back wall. Clara saw Marion slip in at the last minute, sitting in the far corner where Hartley couldn't see her. The jury filed in. Clara tried to read their faces, but they were carefully blank. The judge took her seat. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of fraud in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel. Clara's vision blurred with tears. On the charge of money laundering in the first degree? Guilty. On the charge of witness intimidation? Guilty. 15 charges, 15 guilty verdicts. Clara turned to Adrian and found him crying silently, his shoulders shaking. She pulled him close, and they held each other while the judge read through the remaining counts and cross-demanded polls, and the bailiffs moved to restrain Hartley, who'd finally lost his composure. This is a travesty, Hartley shouted as they led him away. I'll appeal. You haven't won anything. But they had, and everyone in that courtroom knew it. The sentencing hearing happened 3 weeks later. The judge allowed victim impact statements. Peter Harrington went first, reading from a paper with shaking hands about losing his pension and having to sell his home. 6 more victims followed, each one more gutting than the last. Then it was Adrian's turn. He didn't have a prepared statement, just stood there, looking at Hartley, and spoke from somewhere deep and raw. You killed my brother, he said quietly. I can't prove it in a way that satisfies a murder charge, but I know you did. And even if you spend the rest of your life in prison for fraud, that's not justice for Thomas. He paused. When he spoke again, his voice was stronger. But it's justice for the people you stole from, the families you destroyed, the futures you took. And maybe, Adrian's voice caught, maybe that's enough. The judge sentenced Hartley to 32 years in prison. He'd be 80 before he was eligible for parole. Clara watched the bailiffs lead him away and felt something release in her chest. Not happiness, exactly, but closure. Outside the courthouse, reporters mobbed them. Clara let Adrian handle most of it, but one question she answered herself. Mrs. Blackridge, do you regret getting involved in this case? She thought about the brick through their window, the threats, the terror of running for their lives, the 8 months of stress that had aged them both visibly. No, she said. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret doing it. What's next for you and your husband? Clara looked at Adrian, who was fielding questions about appeals and restitution funds. We're going to go home, try to rebuild the life we had to put on hold. Will you continue advocacy work for fraud victims? She hadn't thought about it, but as soon as the question was asked, the answer felt obvious. Yes, she said. I think we will. The restitution took another year to process. Hartley's assets were seized and liquidated. Not enough to make all the victims whole. There never would be. But enough that people like Peter Harrington got back a portion of what they'd lost. The offshore accounts yielded another windfall. Combined with settlements from Hartley's insurance and the sale of his properties, the restitution fund eventually reached £8 million. Not the $12 million that had been stolen, but something. Clara worked with the fund administrators to ensure fair distribution, learned more about financial law than she'd ever wanted to know, started connecting with other fraud victims, other families destroyed by schemes like Hartley's. Adrian joined her after 6 months. Together, they established the Blackridge Foundation, named deliberately, using the surname Thomas had tarnished, trying to rebuild what he'd broken. The foundation provided legal assistance to fraud victims, helped them navigate restitution claims, connected them with resources. It wasn't glamorous work. It didn't make headlines, but it mattered. And slowly, Claire and Adrian found their way back to something that felt like purpose. Webb recovered fully, though he walked with a cane he claimed was purely aesthetic. He continued his investigative work, but he also joined the Foundation's board, taught seminars on financial forensics, helped other victims build cases against the predators who'd targeted them. You've gone soft, Clara teased him one afternoon at a Foundation event. I've gone practical, Webb corrected. Helping people actually pays better than you'd think. Sarah Metcalf disappeared completely. The last Clara heard, she'd relocated abroad with her mother and daughter, started a small business under her new identity, living quietly, safely. She'd sent one message 3 months after the trial. Thank you for giving me a reason to be brave. Clara kept it in her desk drawer, pulled it out on days when the work felt too hard. Marion stayed in London. She reached out to Clara 6 months after the sentencing, asked to meet for coffee. They sat in a quiet cafe in Bloomsbury, the same neighborhood where Clara had once attended charity luncheons that felt meaningless now. Emma's thriving, Marion said, showing Clara photos on her phone. A healthy, smiling 7-year-old with her mother's eyes. She starts ballet next month. That's wonderful. It's possible because of you. Marion set down her phone. I know I said it before, but thank you for not walking away, for fighting even when it would have been easier to stop. Clara stirred her coffee, thinking about all the times she'd almost done exactly that. I had help, Adrian, Webb, you, with your letter. Still, you were the one who chose to keep going. Marion paused. I heard about the foundation, what you're doing for other victims. It's not enough. It'll never be enough to undo what Hartley did. But it's something, and something is better than nothing. They talked for 2 hours. About their daughters. Marion's real one, Clara's hypothetical future ones. About rebuilding. About finding peace after trauma. When they parted, Marion hugged her. If you ever need anything, I know where to find you. The most unexpected consequence came 14 months after the trial. Parliament was debating a new financial crimes bill, stronger penalties for fraud, better protections for victims, mandatory restitution requirements. During the debate, Clara and Adrian were invited to testify before a committee. Clara spoke about the gaps in the system that had allowed Hartley to operate for 20 years. Adrian spoke about the victims who'd been told their losses were just bad investments and had nowhere to turn. The bill passed 6 months later. It wasn't named after them. Thank God, Clara thought. But the committee chair mentioned their testimony in his remarks, called them examples of ordinary citizens who refused to accept that justice was impossible. Clara watched the vote from the gallery and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: pride. Not in herself necessarily, but in what they'd built from the wreckage of that horrible day in the drawing room. On a cool evening in March, almost 2 years after the verdict, Clara and Adrian stood in their garden. The roses were blooming again, properly this time, without blight. Adrian had spent months nursing them back to health, treating it like a personal mission. "I still can't believe they actually grew back," Clara said, touching a pale pink bloom. "Things are tougher than we think," Adrian replied, "including us." Clara looked at their house. The window had been replaced so well you couldn't tell it had ever been broken. But she remembered. She'd always remember. "Do you think about it?" she asked. "The trial, everything before." "Every day." "Regret any of it?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "I regret that it cost us 2 years of peace. I regret that we'll always have to look over our shoulders, even with Hartley in prison. I regret that Thomas is still dead and nothing we did brings him back. But I don't regret fighting. I don't regret the foundation, and I don't regret learning that my wife is stronger than I ever gave her credit for." He turned to her. "You changed, Clara. We both did. For better or worse?" "Better. Harder. More complicated." He smiled slightly. "But definitely better." Clara thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, the one who'd stood in the conservatory, deadheading roses, pretending she didn't hear suspicious phone calls, the one who'd been willing to look away from hard truths. That woman was gone, and Clara didn't miss her. "I'm not sure we ever get back to normal," she said. "Maybe normal wasn't worth getting back to." "What do we have instead?" Adrian pulled her close. "Something real, messy, built on scars instead of illusion." They stood in their garden, watching the roses bloom, and Clara thought about all the ways a marriage could break and rebuild itself. How trust, once shattered, could be forged into something stronger than the original. How choosing to stay was different than never leaving. She'd almost walked away. Almost let Adrian's lies destroy what they'd built. Almost chosen the easy path of self-protection over the hard path of fighting together. She was glad she hadn't, not because everything had worked out perfectly. It hadn't. They still had hard days, still argued, still carried the trauma of what they'd survived. But they'd survived it together, and that made all the difference. 3 years after the verdict, Clara found a letter in the mail. No return address, handwriting she didn't recognize. Inside was a single page. "Mrs. Blackridge, you don't know me, but you saved my father's pension. He was one of Hartley's victims. The restitution money meant he didn't have to sell his house, meant he could live with dignity. He died last month, peacefully, in the home he'd lived in for 40 years. Because of you. I wanted you to know that." Clara read it 3 times, tears streaming down her face. She showed it to Adrian that evening. He held it carefully, like it might dissolve. "This is why we did it," he said quietly. "I know. Not for the headlines, or the trial, or the foundation. For this," Clara agreed, "for the people we'll never meet who got to keep their homes, their dignity, their futures." They added the letter to a file they'd started keeping. Other notes from victims. Thank you cards. Photos of families who'd been helped by the restitution fund. Evidence that it had mattered. That they'd mattered. On a summer afternoon, 5 years after everything began, Clara stood in the drawing room where it had all started. The room looked different now. They'd redecorated, not to erase the memory, but to reclaim the space. New furniture, new curtains, the same bones, but different skin. Adrian found her there, standing by the window. "Thinking about Marion?" he asked. "Thinking about who I was when she walked out of this room." Clara turned to face him. "I was so sure I knew what was happening, so certain you'd betrayed me." "I had, just not the way you thought. You lied to protect me. I ran to protect myself." Clara crossed to him. "We were both wrong. And now?" "Now we know better. We choose truth over protection, partnership over control." She paused. "And we choose each other, every day. Not because we have to, but because we can walk away and we're staying anyway." Adrian kissed her forehead. "That's the real victory, isn't it? Not Hartley in prison, not the foundation, not the law we helped pass. What then? This. Us. Still here, still fighting, still choosing the hard thing because it's the right thing. Clara thought about the past 5 years, the trial, the foundation, the lives they'd helped rebuild, the marriage they'd dismantled and reconstructed from the ground up. It hadn't been perfect. It had been brutal and terrifying and exhausting, but it had been real. And real, Clara had learned, was worth more than perfect ever could be. That evening, they hosted a small gathering at the house. Webb came, cane and all. Sarah sent her regrets from overseas, but included a generous donation to the foundation. 3 of the trial victims came, including Peter Harrington, who'd gotten back enough to secure a small flat and live comfortably. Marion arrived with Emma, now 10, and full of questions about everything. They didn't talk about Hartley, didn't rehash the trial or the terror or the threats. They talked about the future, about the foundation's expansion, about new legislation being proposed, about lives being rebuilt. Clara watched Adrian telling Emma about the roses in the garden, saw Marion laughing with Webb, saw Peter Harrington smiling genuinely for maybe the first time since she'd known him. This wasn't the ending she'd imagined 5 years ago. It was better, because it wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning, messy and complicated and built on scar tissue, but theirs. Clara raised her glass when Adrian called for a toast. To justice, he said. To survival, Webb added. To second chances, Marion offered. Clara looked around the room at the people who'd fought alongside them, who'd survived, who'd chosen to keep going even when it would have been easier to quit. To all of it, she said. And to choosing the hard thing because someone has to. They drank to that. And in the house that had witnessed both her greatest fear and her greatest courage, Clara Blackridge finally understood what she'd been fighting for all along. Not vengeance, not even justice, really, but the simple, radical belief that people mattered, that their lives and losses and futures deserved to be fought for, even when, especially when, the fight was impossible. She'd almost walked away from that belief, almost let fear and hurt override everything else. She was grateful she hadn't, because the woman standing in this room, surrounded by people she'd helped save, was someone Clara actually liked, someone she was proud to be. Strong, scarred, unbreakable, free. Not because she'd avoided pain or chosen the easy path, but because she'd walked through fire and discovered she didn't burn. And that knowledge, that bone-deep certainty that she could survive anything because she already had, changed everything. It meant she stayed in her marriage by choice, not obligation. It meant she fought for justice because she believed in it, not because she needed redemption. It meant she could look at herself in the mirror and recognize the woman looking back. That was the real ending, the real victory. Not Hartley behind bars, not the foundation's success, not even the lives they'd saved, but Clara, whole and strong and free, standing in the wreckage of what she'd thought her life should be and choosing to build something better instead. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Clara found Adrian in the study. He was looking at the drawer that had once been locked. It stood open now, empty except for a folder containing the final restitution report. Strange how it all started here, Adrian said, with secrets I thought I had to keep. And ended with us choosing transparency. Do you think we'll ever stop paying for what happened? Clara considered. I think we'll always carry it, but that's different than paying for it. How so? Paying suggests debt, something owed. But what we carry now, she touched the folder. That's not debt. It's knowledge, experience, the scars that prove we survived. Adrian closed the drawer. I love you. You know that? I do. Clara smiled. But more importantly, I trust you. And you trust me, and that's what we fought for. They stood in the study, in the house that had almost destroyed them and had instead remade them, and Clara felt something settle into place. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of purpose. She'd started this journey as a woman who'd believed love meant never having to fight. She ended it understanding that sometimes love meant fighting harder than you ever thought possible. For truth, for justice, for each other. And sometimes, just sometimes, the fight was worth it. Outside, the roses bloomed in the darkness, their roots deep, their thorns sharp, surviving because they'd learned to weather storms. Just like Clara, just like Adrian, just like everything they'd built together from the ashes of what they'd almost lost, strong, scarred, unbreakable, and finally, impossibly, free.